So what I want to do now is move from the overview of the kind of content of the book and look briefly at what does Bell offer for the practice of Christian ethics from this just war as Christian discipleship perspective, and the practice of the individual. And so as I mentioned, he continues to look at this distinction between public policy checklists and Christian discipleship as far as how the vision of just war plays out. And for the individual, he focuses in on a couple things. As for public policy checklist, he assumes that that the moral life already has a particular shape. And the particular shape for those in the public policy checklist is this law-centered, very deontological in nature. He views it as the duty of the individual to act in accordance with the criteria of the just war theory based primarily on law. Then he contrasts that with that of Christian discipleship, and that it is the moral shape or the moral life of the Christian is that of a character and virtue-centered life. It is rooted in the truth that the characteristics and values of a Christian should inform their belief in wartime as well as in peacetime. So going back, I want to evaluate the law-centered wartime ethic approach and then also look at the character and virtue-centered wartime approach. So again, this law-centered approach, he really says that it plays out in kind of two ways. Is one, knowing the rules, and two, obeying the rules. Now you can see the critique seems to be a bit obvious here, is that not all rules in war or in life in general can be known at that given time. He also, we can understand that obeying the rules sometimes isn't always possible because of a failure of willpower or what have you. He says in the quote, I want to read this, he says, we can know the right thing to do and still not do it because of a failure of our willpower. So essential to this vision of the moral life as a matter of knowing the rules and then following them is the centrality of obedience and the discipline to enforce it. Okay, so again, that we can know the rules, and even knowing the rules doesn't always allow our ethic to take place because our willpower at times will let us down. So in contrast, the character and virtue-centered wartime ethics approach is really much different. It emphasizes the importance of the character and habits which should distinguish the Christian life, even in the times of war. See, this approach, rules are important in the moral life. However, the moral life is far more complex than the law-centered approach would allow. Bell says this, he says, for example, the moral life, particularly in the midst of the fog of war, is rarely as straightforward as the know the rules and follow them approach suggests. For one thing, there is no rule for every situation. Try as we might, we will never anticipate every possible situation that could arise in war and then spell out who the law and rules apply. See, because of this inability to foresee every possible situation, a rule-based, a law-centered approach will fall short because we can just simply not know the rule and law to abide by in any possible or given situation. But instead, he notes that a rule-based ethic is always going to be trying to play keep up with the adapting situation. Therefore, in order for us to ethically live out the just war theory in the Christian context, we must be more focused not on obeying and memorizing rules, but rather on who we are becoming. That a person who, he understands that a person who continually displays the virtue of justice or whatever it is not someone who only occasionally or accidentally does what justice would require, but instead it is someone who characteristically or habitually acts justly. Therefore, to become a just person, we cannot merely memorize rules and laws, but instead we must internalize the meaning and the purpose of these, really the purpose of the rule that it's pointing towards. So the difference, but what is the difference that the virtue and character ethics actually make? Again, a law-centered ethic will fail to keep up. However, a virtue-based ethic allows the flexibility to see beyond the rule. Therefore, ethics can never be primarily about mindlessly following rules, which the public policy checklist would like to assume. But instead, a virtue-based ethics must approach obedience to rules and following orders as the pursuit of the common good. That the virtue of justice is about pursuing the common good for all involved. And so that is kind of the foundation that it launches from. So I hope this kind of helps give you a perspective of how just war as Christian discipleship can inform our individual ethics, that we become a people of justice, that we become a people of loving, of loving our enemies as Jesus taught. And Danny's going to take the piece reflecting on how this impacts the church's ethics in his video now.